Last year's Bridge of Spies would have been so much better if it were more historically accurate. Hey, Cypher here. The Bridge of Spies is mostly about one man's struggle to become a prisoner exchange negotiator, as well as a patriotic defense attorney. It may seem a little too inspirational, but it is an adept movie, but with glaring inaccuracies that honestly slow it down badly. If you saw this and thought it was boring, that's really the reason why. The problem is, it could have been better if it were more historically accurate, because what is inaccurate could have been made better to the point of being interesting. This movie's about a very real man named James Donovan, who was a truly amazing figure, and deserves the recognition this movie gives him. He was just a lawyer when he joined the Navy in 1942, serving as a general counsel in a number of capacities. He even took part as a presenter in the Nuremberg trials. After such an illustrious career, he returned to the Bronx as an insurance lawyer until where the movie begins. In 1957, with him being asked to serve as a defense attorney for a Soviet spy named Rudolf Abel. He held firm and managed to get the spy a prison sentence rather than an execution.
Pursuant to the verdict of guilty as to all counts, the defendant is committed to the custody of the Attorney General of the United States for imprisonment in a federal institution to be selected by him for a period of 30 years.
After the USSR shot down a U-2 plane in 1960, he went to Germany through the newly created Berlin Wall to negotiate a prisoner transfer for the spy he had defended and the U-2 pilot, named Francis Gary Powers. He was successful, and the transfer happened in 1962. He became a well-known prisoner transfer negotiator on the side of his normal lawyerly duties, as well as a school administrator until he died in 1970. Director Steven Spielberg and lead actor Tom Hanks are at the top of their game on this one. Saving Private Ryan was a good movie, but most actors could have played that. Here, it is the conjunction of Hanks and Spielberg that allows them to show the banality of good in people. There's also some cheeky juxtaposition done through smash cuts that really make the viewer reconsider the whole good guy, bad guy dichotomy that we are force-fed about the Cold War. Just watch some of these examples.
All rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, you have to know what happens when an atomic bomb explodes.
Now that's some brilliant stuff, and that's just a few examples. The script has a bunch of callbacks to previous dialogue and brilliant framing devices. There's a lot of work to go off of for this movie. Donovan even produced a book of his own before he died. There were already 2 works to use as well, though nothing very historical as of yet. Though of course there is a new history book after the movie was released. We're not really dealing with a lot of blank spots in the record here. Despite this, the film gets a lot of the timeline mixed up in odd and contradictory ways. It gets a lot correct, but mixes up the timing oddly. It still gets a lot right, including a bunch of stuff I didn't believe was true at first. But what it gets wrong worsens the actual narrative of the movie. When Donovan proposes that Abel be saved from the death penalty in case of needing to trade for prisoners in the future, this was not some backroom deal. He proposed that in open court for all to hear. This especially doesn't make sense when people reference the proposition later on in the movie. By being inaccurate, Spielberg makes a huge plot hole for no particular reason. 77 Sunset Strip, the TV show being played on the TV there, began playing a year after the trial had concluded. Are they saying that this was a problem for the Donovans afterward? If so, that's completely false. No one shot out the windows of the Donovans' place. They did receive some threat mail and some strange phone calls during the trial, to the point of having to delist their phone from the white pages, but that is as far as the malicious behavior went. Spielberg could simply have shown some harassment, which would have been just as effective, but he had to put violence in where there was none. It'll be even worse when we get to the stuff in Germany. This whole thing about U-2 pilots supposedly being told to commit suicide rather than risk capture is absolute hogwash. This is a myth that has been going around since 1960, but it is utterly false. They did have the needle inside the coin in order to kill themselves if they preferred, but it was if they preferred death. There was no standing requirement for them to commit suicide. And there was certainly no order saying that they had to do it to stop them from divulging secrets, although some in the government thought it cowardly to prefer life, making it more of a cultural requirement, but not a real one. Besides, it's not as though they knew that much about the plane that the Soviets couldn't just derive from looking at the plane. The craziness around the building of the Berlin Wall is fairly overstated. There were scenes of consternation like this, but it was not like that mostly. People were stopped by soldiers from crowding the place like this. Also, the student named Pryor was arrested months after the wall had gone up, and was actually in a different country when it went up. This is probably just Spielberg taking license and combining scenes, which is alright, but somewhat overstated. Donovan was sent out only after months of negotiating had already taken place. This movie implies that he's the first to talk to the Soviets, and that's just not the case. Donovan never had his coat stolen like this. There is no evidence to show that he quarreled with street thugs at all. Furthermore, it is heavily hinted that the Soviets knew about the incident, implying that they were purposefully screwing with him. That's just dumb, especially since it did not happen. For beginning with those smash cuts that show how both sides were playing the same game, now Spielberg has to resort to inaccuracy to vilify one side. It's a bit of a contradiction there. In this interrogation scene, Powers is pressured to give up secrets about the U-2 program. The problem here is that he didn't actually have anything to give up. The questions they're asking him in the movie are easily found from the wreckage, and why would a pilot know half of that stuff anyways? That's why there was no suicide order. Pilots are merely there to fly a plane. They aren't engineers or strategists, so why bother informing them of such stuff? The 70,000-foot ceiling was supposed to be above Russian radar, but that was incorrect, and he got shot down for it. Nothing more complicated than that. I can't verify this whole thing about Donovan being duped into having passport problems, but I think it is a plot contrivance to get to an even bigger problem. One of the greatest inaccuracies is when Donovan sees people being shot while climbing the wall. He saw nothing of the sort. The only reason why this is there is that he mentions the shootings in the memoir, but was not a witness to them. He simply read them in the newspaper as everyone else did. Spielberg could have flashed to the events, or shown a zoom in through the newspaper article, but instead, he lies about Donovan's presence, which makes absolutely no sense. There's a nice resolution of this at the end of the movie, but Spielberg did not have to lie in order to do this. As you can see, there are some serious problems. It's a fun movie, but it would have been immensely better if we didn't have to sit through incident after incident, especially the ones that did not really happen. I'm glad I watched it in a setting that I could pause and take a break at any time I pleased, because seeing this in a movie theater would have been boring. So, thanks for watching. Tell me what other based on a true story movies need busting in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and check out some previous episodes. I'll see you next time.